Liz, thank you. 22 minutes past 7. We were talking yesterday about the decline in language learning at school. Lots of you got in touch to point out that you can still learn a language in later life. 3 today listeners tell us now briefly about their experiences of doing that.
I'm Martin Carter. I'm 66 years old and I live in Amberley, a small village in West Sussex. I started to learn French to an A-level standard in 2017 and I managed to get an A in the French A-level, which motivated me to consider Cambridge as an option to do this degree. I then taught myself Italian A-level and managed to achieve an A-star. And then I went to Cambridge and had a lovely 4 years doing my degree in French and Italian. My year abroad, I spent 4 months in Montpellier in France. I don't think I found it any harder than the other students that I was working with.
My name is Caroline. I'm originally from Canada. I've recently taken up learning Brazilian Portuguese. At this stage of my life, I'm learning it because I have sought it out and actually want to learn it. In high school, there was an opportunity to take Latin, and I did for about a year. Learning how to conjugate nouns and verbs was very useful for learning other languages, and there's similar conjugations in Portuguese.
I'm Paul Milray. I'm 69, and I live in London. In my later life, I learned Spanish and Portuguese. Spanish I learned when I was 39. I learned Latin at school and never did it again. When I learned to speak Portuguese, when I learned to speak Spanish, it was having that Latin that I'd done at school that meant that I could learn Portuguese, I could learn Spanish and didn't have to learn the grammar because Latin had taught me that.
Our thanks to Martin, to Caroline, to Paul as well. There's a theme there, isn't there? The theme being Latin, a mur massa mat, and all that stems from it. Let us talk to Lorna Robinson, who's on the line, who is a Latin teacher at Cheney School in Oxford, director of the Iris Project, which is a charity set up to encourage Latin lessons in state schools. Morning to you.
Good morning.
What is it about Latin?
I think it's really interesting on lots of different levels. So it was great to hear those stories from your listeners and how people were noticing the connections between things like, say, Latin and Portuguese and other languages. So Latin obviously forms the basis of lots of the Romance languages and is connected to languages like English. So that's something that's really interesting and important. And there's also the wider cultural context of Latin that I find that young people are really interested in, the stories, the history. So I think those things all together make it a great language to learn.
And yet the government is reducing extra funding for the teaching of Latin, particularly in state schools. This is extra funding that allows Latin lessons for pupils in non-selective state schools as part of the cost-cutting drive. You would believe that they are making a mistake.
Well, I think Latin's a great subject to support in schools, and I think that it is a subject that is thriving in lots of state comprehensive schools. So whether it's taught on the curriculum or whether there are things like after-school clubs, there is quite a lot of Latin being taught that might not be immediately obvious. So obviously I would love for the government to support lots of schemes bringing Latin into schools. And my own experience is that where you deliver Latin to schools, students really enjoy it. It's something that's popular and enjoyed. We're a big comprehensive school serving the east of the city of Oxford, and we have Latin, classical civilization, and now ancient Greek as well. And we teach the subjects right the way up to A-level.
Because there's a sort of, among the many kind of slightly snobbish things said about it, number one, that it has this sort of elitist kind of cultural mark on it, for reasons that are not clear, really, because it's just Latin, it's just a language, isn't it? But also that it's difficult.
Yeah, so I think both of those, obviously there's reasons for those having come about, but I also think that there's lots of work. For example, the first thing you mentioned about Latin being seen as elitist, that is one of the perceptions that's been around for a while, and it's the reason I set up the charity that I run, the Iris Project, which was to promote the learning of Latin in state schools and also their wider communities. So there has been that idea about, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's lots and lots of Latin and classics being taught in state schools now, and loads of great initiatives
But I mean,
classics for
much
all.
more in private schools there. I mean, it is still a fact, isn't it, that if you want to do Latin GCSE, you stand a much better chance of being able to do it and getting the teaching if you're in a private school than in a state school, which seems sort of fundamentally unfair if it is such an opener up of the world.
So there's a challenge in getting Latin to all the students that might want to learn it, certainly. So we'd love to have many more Latin teachers out there, so every child in every state school will be able to access those subjects. I think there's lots of work being done. There's lots more to be done. But my experience on the ground, working with other people that are trying to promote classics in lots of ways, is there's lots of enthusiasm. In terms of just touching back on what you said about Latin being difficult, I think it's one of those things that is a bit of a myth that gets stuck in people's heads. So I teach Latin across the ability range to anyone that wants to learn it. And I find that some students obviously might pick up the grammar more quickly than others. But generally speaking, I don't perceive it as something that people have great difficulty learning at the level at which I'm teaching. And people pretty quickly, the students make connections between words. Like I've been teaching a Portuguese student this year who loves the connections between Latin and Portuguese. So I think that is one of those myths that's sort of been around. And obviously you have to put work into learning a language and learning the vocabulary and conjugating the verbs, declining the nouns. But you have to put work into lots of things. So.
Fair point. Lorna Robinson, Latin teacher, Cheney School in Oxford, director of the RS Project. Thank you.